thinking about hyper-Bitcoinization. So like that intersection is like, my shower thoughts, my before bed weird tangent thoughts. So I could go on and on about it for sure. And what's fun about it is it's like kind of all speculation.
Yeah.
So like I can't be held accountable for anything I say on this live stream because you'll never know whether it comes true or not.
Hell yeah, man. So you studied journalism in college, and I know that you worked in Nashville for a while on a freelance beat with some of the magazines.
That's right.
And I know that you have kind of an affinity for print magazines in general. So can you kind of talk about that? Because it's kind of funny because people, when they see Bitcoin Magazine, they're like, isn't it kind of funny that you have a physical version of a digital currency, a print magazine for digital currency? It's like, well, that's kind of the point.
Yeah, well, I'll start by just sort of saying, so studied journalism, always wanted to be a journalist. Worked at like alternative weeklies, which some still exist in some cities out there, but those are kind of like your free weekly magazines about culture and art. So I've worked there. I've worked at a daily newspaper. The more senior staff was kind of telling me to get out of this industry because it's not going anywhere. I've worked at a trade publication. I freelance for magazines here in Nashville. So I feel like I've seen like the traditional side of the industry, and for the most part was feeling like this is not a great place to kind of plant your flag. This is a career that's not going to last for that long in the way that these publications were doing it.
Right.
And then freelancing in Nashville, that's how I found an eventual position here at Bitcoin Magazine. So I got into Bitcoin from the journalism perspective by reporting on it. I think one of the first stories I did was about people in the Philippines using Bitcoin as a remittance
tool. Who is this?
This was for Bitcoin Magazine back in the day. I think this is for our partnership with NASDAQ. So NASDAQ, which is like a pretty traditional financial news outlet, relied on Bitcoin Magazine and our company to like provide them with Bitcoin content.
And syndicate stuff.
And syndicate stuff. So I was writing for that partnership. And so that was one of the first, covering this story about how workers from the Philippines were using Bitcoin to remit money back to their families was one of these kind of eye-opening, like, okay, Bitcoin is like an actual helpful tool for people. It's got use cases I never really thought of, and it was kind of my rabbit hole moment of like, maybe there's more to this stuff than what the mainstream media.
And when was that?
Oh gosh, this was like 2016 maybe, something like that. So it sort of started from there. So then to kind of answer your question more directly though, I've always loved print magazines just since I was a kid. I think that why does Bitcoin Magazine have this emphasis on print when it's like such a ethereal, intangible technology? We're like the only media company, one of the only people in the space creating a memento that's sort of like set in stone to some degree because it is a print publication about a point in history in Bitcoin. There's a Bitcoin magazine in the Smithsonian. People collect Bitcoin magazines as collector's items. So yeah, like the magazine, the print can't keep up with how fast the technology moves, but it's like a snapshot that you can't get anywhere else, and like that's one of the core elements about a print publication that I've always loved. And so I actually think it's like perfect for Bitcoin, and like this intersection is like super cool. One of the reasons I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the Smithsonian thing because that was one of the cool things, little tidbits about Bitcoin Magazine that I picked up on when I first started here was it's like, oh yeah, this used to be sold in Barnes and Noble, like back in 2012, when Mihai and Vitalik were doing this out of an apartment in a dorm room, and the fact that first issue is the Smithsonian is really cool. It is like a, it's a time capsule. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so stoked that we're doing it again. That was one of my favorite things that we did last year. I mean, I just loved being able to work on that leading up to the conference and seeing how energized you got when we did that. It was really cool.
I'll also say one of my other favorite parts of that is like the design element of it. Yeah. So I think like we obviously have proprietary like header images that come out with all our stories. All news websites have art accompanying it, but like printed art in a print magazine, the layouts are like more eye-catching. There's more room for the designers to like be creative and do crazy stuff. And so I think anyone who picked up our most recent issue of Bitcoin Magazine, one of the first things they're going to notice is like these people are doing Bitcoin related art unlike anybody else in the space too. So I don't have anything to do with that. It's our really talented design team. But another part of my passion for print magazines and cool thing about the intersection of Bitcoin and print here is like the art factor for sure.
Oh yeah, dude, I love our artists. Shout out to Nikki, Tommy, and Pat.
Yes.
Homies on our design team. Nikki actually does the vast majority of images for online and also for the print mag last year.
We need to get her on a happy hour or a podcast or something just to like shine the light a little bit
Honestly,
more on like
yeah,
how cool
we
her
do.
work is and what her process is like.
Her work is awesome. I don't know what her Instagram is for art, and she's not on Twitter, but basically any of our graphics and images come from Nikki, so big shout out to her.
Yes.
I love collaborating with her. One of my favorites actually recently was for the Fed article, the pigs
That was
running away from the farmer.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was really fun. But that's one of the things I totally agree with you about, having a physical memento for the time. And that's what I really hope that we can continue to produce with the print magazine. And I think it's in perfect defiance of the times, because you're starting to see nowadays in digital media, like big digital media groups basically creating outlets for different niches. Like you have like the Recodes of the world and Motherboards, those were the early ones, but I think like Politico has like this giant umbrella now of all these different interests, like sports, finance, tech. You're starting to see it with Medium. They're starting to have theirs, like they took what is it, I can't remember what the names are, but for like there's one for politics and all these different interests.
Yeah, I think Jen is one of them.
Yes.
It's like their culture one.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
And it's like blogging. It's almost like a blogging type thing, because they're all specific interests. It's not really like a traditional media outlet or publication,
I think that's what the media industry has like reached at this point, and that's another thing I really like about Bitcoin Magazine. Like
We're doing the same thing.
You can't I worked at a daily newspaper in the suburbs of Pennsylvania when I was in college, like a summer internship.
Mm-hmm.
And it just tried to, like a daily paper, it tried to be all things for all people. It had a sports section, culture section, business section, etc. I think if it was niche in any way, it was because it only reported to like this suburban town. And I just feel like that, and like the big publications like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today will kind of maybe be able to hold on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone that tries to be kind of generally reporting without like really speaking to one tribe in particular, one niche, I feel like that's the model that's not working. And so to report and just know who your audience is really specifically, we know we're speaking to Bitcoiners.
Yeah, and because that's what gets the SEO too, is like having those specific keywords that people are going to be tuning into.
Yeah, and without even like honing in on a metric, I just feel like philosophically, like knowing who your audience is as an editor, as a writer, as the audience development people, as the business plan along with the publication, like that's just so important. And the more specific you can be, and the more you can hone in on what that audience is interested in, like I feel like that's what you want to focus on. You don't want to be too broad.
Do you think that there's some, perhaps one of the things that I kind of worry about with this model, because I do agree with you, it kind of lets people really dive in, and podcasts are good for this too, because it lets people really sink their teeth into a topic, a very deep level, right? Like you now have people focusing not just on tech, but on Bitcoin, not just on finance, but on a very specific
There was a time when
security.
Wired was like super niche. It was weird that Wired,
yeah,
like pre-internet was like this publication, but right now it's like one of the most broad but still kind of successful pubs out there.
But one of the things that I think about, Wired's a perfect example, and from there, you splinter even further into even different subcategories. One of the things that I wondered, does it run the risk of, you're reporting on things people want to read, but does it also risk the potential that you're reporting what people want to hear?
Oh yeah, and it's not just running that risk, it's like definitely what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think like without getting too broad and speaking out of turn, and again, this is all just my kind of opinion, but I mean, if you look at like Fox News, I mean, that's essentially like they're just kind of like a feedback loop of like telling the audience what they, influencing their audience with opinions, and then like reinforcing those opinions. So it doesn't just run that risk. I mean, that's like essentially the plan and the model.
Mm-hmm.
At Bitcoin Magazine, like I think we
do it.
Yeah, we definitely do it. I'll admit that for sure. I was gonna say I give ourselves a pass, or like that doesn't keep me up at night so badly, because I feel like we're pretty transparent about it. Like Bitcoin in general is transparent about like this is a cult for like like
for
believers only, and like we're upfront about that. The parts of Bitcoin that we reinforce, I feel like, are like the accessibility to everybody, the opportunity to opt out of the financial system that's let so many people down, the ethos coming out of the 2008 financial crisis. Like, obviously there's going to be opinions that this is bad and opinions that this are good, but I'm comfortable being on that in a way that there's some publications where I'd be like, wow, we're reinforcing some like poisonous negative things. I never feel that way here. That is all to say, like, I'm sure there are people out there who are.
And the other thing too, you have to almost, the thing that keeps me, lets me sleep well at night is knowing that you almost have to have Bitcoin Magazine because of the virulent bias of some of the mainstream publications, where it's just absolute nonsensical, because it's just complete ignorance of how Bitcoin works and complete denial about it being worth anything at all.
Right. Bitcoin needs an advocacy group.
It does.
You know, it's unfair that it's a neutral technology with most people deriding it and don't know about it.
And I think that's why people who really applauded us for going back to Bitcoin only, I think that's why they really appreciated it, because at a time in 2017 and even 18, when ICOs and shitcoins and everything were still getting a lot of coverage, and these fundraisers were going on, and like a lot of the publications were covering them as like and saying things like, "Is this the next Bitcoin?" A lot of stuff got lost in the noise. Like a lot of direction got lost in the noise. And I think people were happy that we went back to the roots of this entire movement. And like, it's not crypto, guys, it's Bitcoin. That's the thing.
Right. From a media standpoint, from an editorial standpoint, I think that was it seemed like it was going to work well. And I think it's proven just like to make our jobs much more clear, fun to do. Audience seems to appreciate it. So, and I think maybe that's even an argument for what we were talking about earlier. Like going niche is smart, to know exactly what your audience is, exactly what kind of narrative you have. Really is important editorially.
Well, and you can foster a community too, I think. And I think that's what Bitcoin 2020 has also been about. Like having a really good Bitcoin conference in the United States, because most of them, like in terms of, you have like MIT Bitcoin Expo, which is a very technical conference, but having like a conference as a get together, Bitcoin 2020, like North America doesn't have them in the same way Europe does. Right. But what were you?
No, and I think that again is just another layer of what we've been talking about. Like, you're kind of like building an audience. You're providing an experience for the audience. So like we're doing that through a media publication, but I think that extends to like the event and just events in general as well. It's something that a lot of media companies are doing because it's like a revenue driver in a way that like providing the news unfortunately is not. And so you're kind of like creating a culture. You're creating like more than just like giving people the news. You're like giving them the news with your narrative attached to it, with your opinion attached to it, and like creating a culture and community. And I think that's like the future for media to be successful. It's not going to work anymore to just generically report the news, because that's happening from so many different outlets now and from so many like different people.
Yeah, and people want commentary.
I know. It's just, you got to be careful with like, as a reader, you need to be careful about like, is this commentary biased? Is this true? That's a whole other happy hour episode.
It is a whole other happy hour episode. But I remember I took a politics class in high school, and we were reading about media framing and stuff. And ever since I took that class, I feel like I can't help but read any publication and see their bias, because it's in the
which is good.
It is, but the thing is, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn too much here, but it's not that easy to see for people who don't have a really firm grasp of the English language, because it's also, it's in very subtle ways. It's in the kind of verbs that they use. It's in the kind of adjectives that they use.
Publications don't want you to see that.
Yeah.
They're going to present themselves as
neutral
unbiased
and
news. I think the New York Times catchphrase forever is like, all the news that's fit to print, and it does
Yeah.
not include any kind of disclaimer about like certain political leanings that they might
No.
have, or pro New York City reporting they do, or whatever. Everyone has a bias. One thing I like about Bitcoin Magazine is like we're so upfront of that. There's no question that we're like pro Bitcoin, and we're
That's
loud
so
and
true.
proud about that. And that's another reason why. And I think we're ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah,
I think the farther we go down this rabbit hole, more and more people are going
Yeah.
to realize that all news is biased and be able to pick out, maybe even stop looking for neutral facts
Yeah.
and just start accepting agendas.
Yeah.
And I think being clear about it is like a real positive. That way.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like in my bio I put like if it wasn't obvious already, he holds Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. That
Which
should
I think
be
is
in
like
our bios.
I just think like the disclaimers for that is really funny because like I understand doing it for shitcoins if you wrote some puff piece about something,
Right.
but for Bitcoin, I mean I understand it. If you're saying something effusively positive, then you should probably tell people you own Bitcoin. But I almost just assume I kind of just at this point I take it for granted. It's like if I'm interacting with you in this circle, then of course you own Bitcoin. Of course you know I own Bitcoin. Of course you know I like Bitcoin. But I think that's also just a product of being in a really kind of tight.
I think we take it for granted,
Yeah.
and I'm guilty of this, and probably it trickles down to some degree to everyone here.
Yeah.
But I think we're trying to speak to the Bitcoiners. That's our goal, and that's how we're approaching this.
Yeah.
But we probably need to keep in mind at all times that like new people who have just heard about Bitcoin for the first time are seeing our stuff, and want to be cognizant that like they really deserve like the hard facts. We do have fact-based guides. We definitely have articles that are purely reported without bias.
And that's the other thing too that I think is important to maintain is like, and something that we've talked about and tried to strike a balance with the magazine is like being able to give the hardcore Bitcoiners some nice Reader's Digest material they can really sink their teeth into, but also giving people who are new to Bitcoin something that they can digest and helps them understand it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's for our approach right now. That's guides. Profiles of people, I think, are a good way to do that.
Profiles are great for this, I believe, and like interview pieces, I think too, especially for Bitcoin culture, which is something that I kind of like about the way we're kind of rebranding ourselves now. Is kind of taking a look at Bitcoin culture writ large. I know we talked earlier about you really liking this idea of preserving the idea, the feel of a print magazine in digital form. So perhaps we can maybe talk about the change of pace we're going to be taking.
For sure. I think all right, so what are the things that I love about, and then again, this is just Peter's opinion here.
Yeah.
But what are the things that I love about a print magazine? I think I've already spoken about this, but it like captures a moment in time. So it like acts as a touchstone. I say I'm probably a weird hoarder this way, but like really good issues of magazines that I subscribe to personally, like I might keep them around for a while on my bookshelf because I do like to go back and look at the pictures and stuff. They are great showcases for art. I think as we redesign our website every time, a huge consideration is like how we best can be able to showcase these really cool illustrations that we get done. How is this article online going to like portray an infographic we've put a lot of work into? So that's something we try to recreate on the digital side. That's like a cool factor from print magazines. And I think like we've talked about this a lot, but like magazine issues set a narrative in a really interesting way. Like this is not a great example, but like GQ does like a Man of the Year thing, or like Rolling Stone will do like the Hollywood issue. So like they're doing a special issue where not all the content, but a majority of it is like tied together around a theme, and like you're pushing that theme and why it's important and telling different stories within that. That's a cool thing that print does, that if you're just a streaming news website publishing stories as soon as you have it, you can't really get that across as easily. So something we're looking at is a model that where we have like several stories tied to a larger theme by mostly you, but anyone else on staff and guest contributors and all that. And I think in my mind at least, one thing that it's trying to capture is sort of that special feeling of like a themed issue of a magazine that you can get, and I feel like we can. I'm sure other bigger, like more general news outlets online do stuff like that, and newsletters are like that. But we'd probably be the only like crypto Bitcoin focused publication thinking of it that way. So it'd be kind of cool to differentiate ourselves through a magazine focused approach.
Yeah, I think so. So we've started this new publishing schedule that Peter's alluding to, where we publish on Tuesdays, and all the content kind of gravitates around a central theme. We're going to hopefully get a website redesign pushed out pretty soon to kind of accommodate it a little bit better. But I think a lot of opportunities to explore different types of media, video, infographics, podcast, stuff like that. A lot of stuff orbiting.
Right.
know.
I don't know how I can draw the direct connection to print from this, but another thing we're doing is we put so much work into like a really detailed profile of somebody, or like we're doing like magazine focused, so like the turnaround's not that quick, giving our writers time to do lots of research, and it's like fairly like relatively long. And so we want to like maximize that. So like, yes, I think you can read the article, but we have so much more knowledge from our writers who did all this research and perspective on the piece that we want to do a video about it too, podcasts about it, and looking for other ways to like wring more out of that story. And so that's like exciting too. I don't see print magazines necessarily do that, but sometimes you'll see like a print magazine puts an issue out, and then their website, maybe whoever the cover shoot was for that magazine, they have that person do like a video interview too, and like kind of like while they have them in the studio, create some online content out of it. So I kind of think about it that way a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think that going back to that contrast between the digital and the print, I think the print magazine that we'll be pushing out halfway through this year will have a lot of opportunity for some, kind of auxiliary media engagement, like puzzles and things like that.
Yeah, we need to. Everyone always has awesome ideas around that, and then we end up accidentally like filling the magazines up with just straight up articles because we have so much to say. But lots of cool like multimedia ideas. That's another cool thing about magazines in your hands. Like you can do a crossword puzzle. You can pull out posters. We've done that a lot. So that we should definitely, like, if we're already getting something into people's hands, like let's take that to the max and get them like 3 or 4 cool products in their hands, all like tucked into the print magazine.
Absolutely. What do you like for a cover theme? A happening?
Yeah, I think it's.
I feel like you gotta.
I think it's kind of like the plan right now is to put it out right at the happening, and so that's almost definitely what we'd want to lead with. And like even today, right now, we were talking before. That's kind of like the biggest story in Bitcoin when it's like a bit quiet, nothing crazy's going on. I think most of the noise you hear is like, "Hey, remember the happening's coming up."
And then people,
what's happening so far?
And people are chirping and yapping about like, is it priced in or not?
Yeah.
Which I think that's why. I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see because like Bitcoin hasn't had a happening when it's had this, obviously this goes without saying, but when it's had this much awareness around it.
Yeah, so it'll like we look at previous happenings and like try to predict what's going to happen, but like Bitcoin, you really can't because like all this stuff is unprecedented, obviously.
And Bitcoin always proves to you that you can never anticipate
That's right.
the future.
Yeah. That being said, I just feel like at least for me, because my own personal Bitcoin journey, at this point, I'm like more like, this happens, like we do have perspective that like this isn't the first rodeo, and like people who have been in Bitcoin at least have a sense of like, it is important to report on. Yeah. I think if people are interested to speculate on what it's going to mean for Bitcoin, this happening in particular. But that being said, like, we've gone through this before and it's going to happen again, and like for some degree it's like predictable and business as usual. I
feel that, and it really is, and I think that's why some people say like it's such a nothing burger, and I think why things are so quiet, because some people were like, oh, the halvening's coming up, and like we're seeing some really nice price action right now, so I mean people are obviously pretty happy about that. But I guess what I'm just curious about as we kind of enter this potentially a new market phase or new market cycle, what's gonna happen to all these shit coins? Because they're still there, man. And like,
yeah, one narrative I'm seeing on Twitter a lot is like alt season's never coming back.
Yeah.
Which I bet it has been called before. It doesn't exist. I personally think that Bitcoin's like gold, and that doesn't mean there can't be a silver, and like other use cases, and cryptocurrency can do lots of different things. So that's how I look at Bitcoin. And
even if they're shit coins, markets are irrational, and people will put money into them.
Right. But I think I am hoping to some level like the shitcoin markets are dead and not coming back, as in I'm hoping we're not going to get another like huge
crazy like
ICO
frantic
boom.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous, man. It just completely blew everything out of proportion.
Yeah, I wonder but if Bitcoin moons, is that kind of like inevitable?
Yeah,
I think a big thing that the ICO boom was reflecting on was like, okay, Bitcoin's getting legit, and people are feeling like they missed the boat,
and they want to get the next Bitcoin.
They want to get the next Bitcoin, and that feeling only is going to strengthen if Bitcoin goes up a ton.
I mean, yeah, a lot of people get to Bitcoin through alts. I got to Bitcoin through alts. I finally was baptized and see the lights.
First bag.
I mean, the first thing I ever bought was Bitcoin, and then Ether, and then Litecoin. I bought those three.
Yeah.
And then I bought just all the shit coins. Like, I didn't know anything. I was absolutely ignorant. This was back in like the 2017, like right before everything started getting like absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And that's one great thing about working in a Maximals publication is you realize that a lot of the other things are just bullshit, and you need to keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah, but I think we can. Yeah, I mean,
there are some things that I still think are interesting.
Right, that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I would like to. I think at least Ethereum, even if you think it's like pretty, the security leaves a lot to be desired, and we don't know what's going to happen with the ETH 2.0 upgrade. It's still interesting. Like, it's interesting to see all that stuff unfold.
Yeah.
I'm not really a big DeFi
Sometimes
person.
I'm like, if we were at ETH Magazine, we would have way more to report on, because there's just way more drama, and like obviously Vitalik is like a real person out there making news in a way that Satoshi's not.
I think there'd be more things to talk about, but maybe for fewer people to find interesting.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true. And like what we report on would be irrelevant more quickly than like what we're able to do at Bitcoin Magazine.
Yeah.
But I just mean like I'd have to really be like paying attention to the Twitter churn if I was at ETH Magazine.
Yeah.
Versus like Bitcoin Magazine on some level is like kind of above the noise, because the technology's more legacy, more solid in a lot of ways.
Very much. I mean, Bitcoin has, everyone always calls it first mover advantage, but it's just, I mean, Bitcoin is the revolution. Like, Bitcoin is the blockchain. It's the longest chain, and it always will be.
Right. So feeling confident about that gives you like kind of a different perspective. Covering the news-wise.
I think so.
Than, like an altcoin.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know, Bitcoiners just have more conviction, I think. Though the ETH heads are getting up there. They're getting culty, man. Yeah. They're taking some cues out of the Bitcoiner playbook.
Right, that's right. I think that's the best way to put it. That might be how I put it. Bitcoin's like a real cult with like tenets, like set in stone, in a way that
the Bitcoin 10 commandments.
Yeah. So it feels like more, definitely.
Well, maybe that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, the only other thing I would have brought up is one thing I think about Bitcoin in the age of media, and this is like pure speculation, but we talked about this yesterday, I think. Cryptocurrency micropayments might be a way that, like, what's the real future? So, like, right now, I think the interim future is continuing to do publications that are just super niche and have, like, kind of fostering a community level to them with events and agendas and letting people give feedback and that kind of stuff that we're trying to do. But I wonder how long, like, even that business model can last. For instance, everybody in Bitcoin has a podcast. Like, at a certain point, people are going to be their own content creators, and that's sort of like what we do is so valuable. But I wonder how much people value it, and like where publications can get the money to stay afloat one thing we've talked about and that I think is interesting for sure is a blockchain or cryptocurrency enabled micropayments model where like you're getting half a cent for
right, and then you can unlock an article because we already have stuff like this, paywalls with Lightning. I was actually thinking just now, Jack Mallers Zap's new strike thing could potentially be a use case for this. You could have users using the app to basically do dollar micropayments, but you're just using Zap on the back end to then keep track of the Bitcoin that is facilitated through that, right? Then you'd cash it out for the publishers when they wanted it cashed out, or they could just keep the Bitcoin if they wanted to. That would be ultimately, that's the only thing that I would say about this concept is in the interim to do it, you'd have to have a cash balance that was stable, and you'd have to have people interfacing with cash. And Bitcoin would have to be on the back end. But the end goal would hopefully be to have people just using Bitcoin without having to go to the cash. Because if you had a Bitcoin micro economy or just an economy, then this could already work.
It might work for us, but probably not media at large.
I don't know why we haven't done it.
I think I don't know. I think anyone watching or listening, and I feel this way, is like if I can get content for free, as a reader, there's different ways of generating revenue. One of the ones, but I think like when I think through it, I'd almost rather give micropayments and pay for straight up news and facilitate that way.
1,000 sats.
Then take free news that's kind of amateur or has a bias that's not being disclosed or weirdly shills for, you know what I mean? So it might be actually the best solution for consumers.
Yeah, and I think for some of these Bitcoiners too, just like 1,000 or 10,000 sats, maybe 1,000 sats. 10,000 sats is $1, but 1,000 sats, 1 penny.
Yeah.
For an article.
Maybe we just hold out for a massive whale donation that just keeps us going. So I think big media in the age of Bitcoin has an interesting future ahead of it for sure.
I think that Bitcoin could definitely change it, but it also requires people to change how they view engaging with content, and they have to be okay with paying a little bit. But people pay $7 for a cup of coffee, pay $10 for a beer.
Yeah. I know there's just so much free stuff out there. Yeah. I think that's the barrier, and that's only going to increase.
Because the internet is by its nature open source and accessible, and a lot of the content that was on the internet, especially in the early ages, was just people putting it on there, and anyone can access it.
Right.
So that legacy persists. But anyway, Peter, this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I could go on and on forever. So thanks for indulging me in this one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Where can people find you?
Definitely. I have a byline in Bitcoin Magazine. Don't write as much as I should, but you can find some of my work there. And then I'm on Twitter at Peter Chawaga. That's CHAWAGA.
And your Weekly Bits podcast.
That's right. And I do the Weekly Bits podcast. You can find that on the Let's Talk Bitcoin network, and tweeted out by Bitcoin Magazine and myself. So that comes out every week on Wednesdays.
Nice. And you can find me on Twitter at As I Lay Hodling. My name, Colin Harper, 1L. It's also on my Twitter username. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll see you next week.